So today we're going to talk about dreaming in new theater, which hopefully when we discuss it doesn't sound quite so ethereal. And we're also videotaping it too, for those of you that don't know. We found a pretty good chunk of our audience watches it online later, so we'll be seen in Nigeria. In little formal introductions, I figure it'd be fun to just start with you, Deb, and introduce yourselves and say a little bit about what you do.
Sure. Hi, I'm Deb Clapp. I'm the Executive Director of the League of Chicago Theaters. We are a service and support organization for Chicago Theater. And so earlier when we were told what to say, Jen or Tony, I can't remember which one, said to talk about what you're passionate about. It was Jen. I am passionate about Chicago Theater, and I, personally, my mission is about making it easier for all kinds of theaters to operate in Chicago. And to that end, to trying to get at some of these, what we're really trying to focus on now is to get at some of these issues that have been affecting us for all time, such as space and money. I hate to just throw money out there because there's so many different ways to deal with that, but to really get into, we've been working a lot on marketing, and we work a lot on advocacy and policy and stuff like that, so to really dig into some of these issues. And I won't go on talking about it forever because there's a lot of us, and probably people who are more interesting than me.
My name is Marc Pinate, and I've been here in Chicago for a couple of years, just getting my MFA in directing at DePaul at the theater school. But my passion lies in experimental theater, non-traditional. I'm originally from the Bay Area. Last 4 or 5 years before I came out here, I was working a lot in street theater, guerrilla theater, doing performances on trains, bus stops, food courts at the mall, and so a lot of what what I'm really interested in is injecting theater into people's everyday reality, as opposed to something where it's separate from your everyday thing, where you go to this building and pay some money and for 2 hours you do it, and then you have regular life. I feel that advertising is infused into our reality every turn we take. Billboards, TVs on at the airport, wherever and I don't see why theater can't infiltrate our lives in the same way, in little 2-minute bursts or 15-minute bursts. And along with that, though, I also am a big advocate of resuscitating the ritual roots of theater. We all have, if you study theater, it started with the Greeks and the Festival of Dionysus and da-da-da. But really, all around the world, even outside of Western civilization, all theater has started as a religious ceremony, right? And so I think it would do us as a society well to look at that again and see how we can make theatrical events a little more of a ceremony for the society, for the community that you're involved in the way that Native Americans, do their dances to bless, a newborn baby or something like that. Yeah. So anyway, that's my story.
I'm stealing his answer. Reginald.
Hi, I'm Minita Gandhi, and I've been in Chicago for about 5.5 years. I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area, and I'm primarily an actor, and I'm also a writer. I'm really passionate about stories and storytelling, and the ability for language and stories to change lives and to create a place where people can objectively look at their own lives and make positive social and political changes in their own lives in the community. As I've been in Chicago, something that has become something that's really important to me is really becoming a part of this full artistic community and helping to develop opportunities for actors, writers, and playwrights of all ethnicities and genders and backgrounds. And I'm also really interested in helping artists develop a voice in art criticism, because I think it's really important. I know that my parents did not grow up going to the theater. It just wasn't really part of their lives. And I think that's true for a lot of people I know. And one thing I'm really passionate about is getting communities and people that weren't raised with theater as being a strong part of their life, how to get them to the theater, and how to make how to make it more acceptable for their children to be a part of the theater environment, and for that to really be embraced.
So hi, I'm like, how do I follow that? I'm Bernardo. I am an actor, writer, director, choreographer, bon vivant. I am the social media manager, the resident playwright, and collective member of Bailiwick Chicago. And our mission statement, which I am quite passionate about, is producing socially aware and diverse theater, and taking innovative takes on classic theater, and new musicals, new works, which is awesome. But I'm also, at my core, I'm really passionate about new American theater, or creating a new American theater where race and gender and sexual identity and gender identity isn't an issue in a play, and it's barely even a starting point of a play. It's more of just a part of the given circumstances, and the relationships of the people are the issue of the play. And I'm really passionate about getting rid of tokenism. Like, I hate being the token Asian or the token gay in theater, so those are just those are some things I am passionate about. And comic books. What was the last one? Comic books.
My name is Edmund. Originally from Houston, Texas. Recent transplant to the wonderful city of Chicago. I'm a member of Chicago Dramatists. I don't know what else to say. Playwright, producer, founder of 3 different theater companies in 3 different cities. And I'm currently working on a 9-play series. What am I passionate about? What am I passionate about? They all had good answers. So trying to make myself sound really intelligent. Let me think. Okay. I'm really, really passionate about building our foundation of our future by taking a really close glimpse of our past, because I feel like until we really understand our past, then we can't really build upon the foundation that we have right now. I don't know if that made any sense whatsoever. But that's what I really, really am interested in doing with my work and my writing. So everything that I work on, it parallels both the past and the present as an examination of where we're going. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Neal Dandade, and I'm actually from 10 hours down the road from where you're from. I'm from El Paso, Texas, originally. Yeah, we're brothers. If brothers live 10 hours away from each other, we're brothers. They do, yeah. Texas is a large state. It's a huge state. Yeah. So I am from El Paso, Texas. I've lived in Chicago since 2006. Let's see, currently I write and perform over at the Annoyance Theater, and I do some work with the Second City National Touring Company as well, and I just finished an MFA in Writing for Screen and Stage up at Northwestern in June. So I've been in Chicago for a while, and I am, very passionate about comedy, I guess, and more specifically using comedy as a tool to more accurately reflect the sort of shifting demographics in our country, both in terms of who is represented in comedy and how comedy is delivered and who it's delivered to. The people who show up at comedy shows, how comedy shows are written, and who are in those shows. I'm very passionate about shaking that up and if anything, without necessarily having an agenda one way or the other, merely listening and evaluating to society and see how it wants comedy to act, and to try to use comedy as a tool to sort of forward socio-political causes from an organic way that comes from really truly listening to the people who need change versus overlaying what one thinks change should look like or change should be. And I sort of do that through writing, performing, and educating as well, particularly educating youth in sort of comedy techniques to be used sort of in their, for whether it's ESL sort of training or whether it's simply as a way to bring their communities together. It's something I'm very passionate about.
I want to change my answer.
It's a great answer.
You have the whole panel. I'm Elaine Romero. I'm a playwright. I'm passionate about writing plays. I'm absolutely addicted. And I love teamwork. I love the collaborative nature of the work that we do. I'm interested in moral questions in my work. I'm currently working on a trilogy of plays about the U.S. at war. I'm working backwards in time. I love to play with time in my work. I love to play with space and place. I'm really interested that in our lives not just being in these bodies in this place, but there being other layers of things. And I explore that frequently in my work. And I'm really interested in a diverse theater, a theater. You know, I had a conversation with an actor the other day, and she was telling me, now people are telling me, she's African American, she was saying, people are telling me that if we do a certain play, and it's like set in France, and it's like in the 18th century, that I really can't be in that play. And so we had this whole conversation, and she was feeling like maybe they were right, and I'm like, absolutely no, they're not right at all. And that's the kind of theater I want, in which, you know, we take our willing suspension of disbelief, and we bring it, you know, when it comes to gender, when it comes to diversity. And I think, you know, that's a place that I'd like to see us all start. I'm also really interested in mentoring and mentorship, and the idea of helping each other and being generous. I think that that's one thing I really love about being here in Chicago, is just the amount of generosity in the theater community. And I think that's something I want to keep cultivating around me and among ourselves. I think it just changes everything, and it makes theater a place for us to thrive. And it builds our souls as opposed to breaking them down, and I think that's what we need to do.
Cool. So what I'll do, I'll throw out some questions to the whole panel, and then I'll ask some questions of individuals. Oh, right. My name's Tony Adams. I'm Artistic Director of Halcyon Theatre, and I am passionate about connecting people. Which usually I'm not that succinct about. And I'm really excited by how broad of a range of perspectives are here, from all the different ways one can be a practitioner or advocate. That's one of the things I love. And total side note, it's really funny when people bring up France and how an African American actor can't do French. because Dumas was black.
Right.
Yeah. That's like,
just a little side note.
Yeah, a lot of people won't cast an African American actor in his plays. Anyway, so the first one I'll start off with a quote, and sound smart for a bit, but there is a point to it. So in The Birth of Tragedy, Nietzsche says, "The beautiful appearance of the world of dreams, in whose creation each man is a complete artist, is the precondition of all plastic art, and also, in fact, we shall see an important part of poetry. We enjoy the form with an immediate understanding. Every shape speaks to us. Nothing is indifferent or unnecessary." So the first question I'd like to throw out to anybody who'd like to answer is, what is a theater where everything speaks to us, nothing is indifferent or unnecessary? What does that look like?
I'll go. So the first time that I was a late bloomer to the wonderful world of theater, and the first show that I ever saw was August Wilson's Two Trains Running, and it was a part of this thing in which gentrification was happening in Houston, especially in the Third Ward area where I'm from, and just one of our big things was, this is our home, and you can't take that away from us. And when people came to see this play, in a way it served as a rallying call. Even for me as a young person who didn't really understand what gentrification was and all that other stuff, I fully got invested into how can I help build up my community, and how can I be a part of this cause, this need to protect your home and your community base. And so that spurred something inside of me, and it spurred something inside of the entire audience that was there at that moment. And I feel that is what makes amazing theater. That is the necessary theater, when it spurs something within us, in our souls.
Yeah, I think I can address it on the flip side. Got it, Filipino flip side. I can say, like, when the question about what theater that speaks to everyone, I can say what that's not, and that's when you try to water down a piece and try to make it speak to everyone. I mean, you know, when you're a young playwright and I was like conceiving things as a kid, I was like, okay, well, it's never going to be classic, it's never going to be timeless, it's not going to be a Death of a Salesman if I make it specifically Filipino, if I make it specifically gay, if I make... And I find that, like, I'm finally finding my voice as a playwright, and people are reading my work, responding to my work, and seeing my work next season. That because I made it so specific, because I said, this is about a Filipino-American family. One of them's gay. One of them's dating an African-American lawyer. It's all these specificities that make it universal. And you're able, as an audience member, to see someone else's experience and find the universal themes and concepts and message within that. So I fear that when artists are trying to create and they want it to speak to everyone, by trying to please everyone, it's not going to speak to anyone.
Yeah, I'd like to echo that. I mean, I think, yeah, there is something to be said about achieving universality through specificity. And what I love about that, and what I love about this quote as well, is that there's an economy that's inherent in that, right? That nothing is wasted. And I think that's especially important for us being theater artists versus film artists or TV artists, because we are working with liveness in a way that I think a lot of other mediums don't. And I think that the sort of economy and the preservation of the sort of uniqueness of that plastic art, I think, has everything to do with the way our theater adapts. Everything from, people using the space in different ways, and also looking at space in different ways, and looking at the entire experience in a different way. So much about, we're talking about building a new theater here, and I think one thing we have to acknowledge is that technology is advancing in ways that change the fundamental way people experience our world. Right. And so I think a large part of that is theater adapting itself to those changes. And I wish I knew how that was done. I guess
well, just to really just to add to what you're saying, not only technology within how we do theater, but technology in how we connect with our audiences before, after, and during. I mean, social media is a huge, huge tool. Not in just I'm trying to get bailiwick away, and we're, hopefully doing a good job away from just promoting our work. I mean, we are promoting other people's works as well, but really starting the conversation about what the piece is and or just the themes of the piece. And I think that in and out of the theater, technology is going to be really huge on how it speaks to people.
So, Minita.
Yes.
So the idea of a new theater is as old as theater in all its different cultures. The strength of the tide waxes and wanes, but it's always there. Is now any different than previous times?
In terms of a desire for a new theater, no, I think that we're always striving to improve upon whatever it is we're standing upon. So I think the idea of coming up with a concept for a new theater is extremely relevant, and definitely something that I feel is really happening in our community. I mean, that's why we're all here today having this panel discussion, because I think we can feel the impacts of social media. I think that there's been a lot of talk over the past few years about non-traditional casting. How do we get diversity up on stage? There's been theaters that have been developed now that focus specifically on playwrights of certain diverse backgrounds to kind of get that going. So I think all of these kinds of theaters are springing up everywhere because of our collective desire to have something that is really absolutely relevant and present and true to where we are now as a society. And because our society is so diverse, I'm really curious to see if we can come up with one theater that hits all of those marks for everyone. I don't know if that will ever be the case, but I do really think there is a lot of merit in striving for that and developing at least a few theaters that are strongly trying to achieve that as part of their missions.
Is it kind of like David Henry Long always says that no artist or theater can represent an entire community, but a community of artists can represent an entire community?
Absolutely.
I absolutely
That's true.
agree.
Yeah, that's true. Absolutely.
I guess, Deb, the next question I have is for you. I've been talking a lot with Rotimi Babatunde, who's a fantastic Nigerian playwright. And one of the interesting things about him is his work has been done, well, we did it in Chicago, so he's been done in the U.S., he's been produced in Germany and Sweden, and Royal Courts commissioned a ton of his stuff, but he's never even had a reading in Nigeria because there's no infrastructure whatsoever. And obviously Nigeria has vastly different political and security issues that thankfully we don't have here. But if you came into a situation where there's no infrastructure for the performing arts and you had the ability to start from scratch, what would you build first?
Wow.
That's
What a great
I asked
question.
you because so much of your day job is in infrastructure, in planning, and organization.
Yeah. Wow. What would I build? If there were no infrastructure, what would I build? Specifically for theater?
The performing arts in general.
For the performing arts?
Or maybe a better way to phrase it, I always go back to when you go to the oldest traditions, there was not a separation of theater and dance and poetry and storytelling, they were all one.
Yeah.
So if you start from that idea, what
Yeah.
needs to happen for the new?
Yeah. Wow. So I think that if I were to go, so I'm imagining myself going to Nigeria and specifically going into a place and, building this infrastructure in which performance can thrive. And so I would, to think specifically about the space itself, I guess, is what I would get into first. And it would be, a really, I think we have to create spaces that are more open for people to come in. You even, you look at sort of the traditional way that this theater is built, and it has to be, I think that these spaces need to be much more open, that there needs to be much more going on inside of a space in which performance is happening, and that we can accommodate all the different kinds of work that's being created. And now I'm thinking not about Nigeria, but about Chicago, but to accommodate all the different kinds of things that are being created, whether it is poetry or storytelling, which is getting to be, so important in our community, or it is, devised works that are, that require, not every time, but sometimes, require a specific kind of a space. I'm envisioning a space in which you could, in which you could stage something like Sleep No More, and also, stage a small poetry reading. But that, is very much rooted in the community in which it's in, and is very inviting. No one's figured that out yet, right? How to get people to walk in the door when they're not coming in at a specific time for a specific show. And that might be about having something going on all the time, but I don't know. I don't know if it's just about, it sort of goes back years ago. There was this big study done about museums, because nobody would go, and then, and the whole problem was, the big stairs they put in front, right? So it's like, so you're intimidated because you feel like you're walking into the temple of culture. And I think we still tend to build our theaters that way. So not to build a temple of culture, but to build something that is open and welcoming to an entire community, whether you're there to see a show or not.
I'll go with Marc.
That's that's a really good question, Tony.
How would you respond to that, Marc? Because you have equal foots in
Yeah,
building theaters and doing theater outdoors.
I think also, I think the re-looking at the way the intersectionality, this idea of a theater with a subscriber base, putting out 4 or 5 shows, that sort of model is really difficult to sustain, and it really, and relying on grants and these types of things really limits what can be done and how many theaters can exist. Something I wrote a paper on this last year was And I mean, it's not the answer either, but just as a different way of like, okay, how could you have like some kind of like company, quasi company that doesn't actually have a space that it performs in, because the entire city is the space that it performs in, right? That doesn't necessarily have an ensemble of these 15 people, but that has a coalition of, you know, I don't know, 50 people that sometimes work on this project, but don't work on every, you know, that sort of rotate in and out. And so, yeah, you know, like figuring out how to do, and I think there's some groups doing this. I'm not trying to say I've invented anything, but you know, yeah, finding public spaces to perform in, getting together the team for this particular project, you know, because they're in between gigs, and that these are the group of people you have available, and devising works or creating works or working with writers and performers and musicians and designers, sort of ad hoc, but on, you know, and I think, yeah, anyway, I'm speaking more details, but I think those kinds of things, I don't know where, you know, then the other thing is like, there's no like tickets to be sold, so then there's no revenue. So I don't know how you like pay people or anything, but
how you support it is you know, that's an entirely different question, and you know, I've been thinking about so many things lately, and I went in Western Massachusetts. They're a company called Double Edge. Really quickly, they essentially support themselves. They're a company of 10 actors, and they're on a farm, and it's rural, and they're way out there, and but they're supporting themselves, and they're, you know, and I went there expecting to find, you know, kind of a bunch of kooks, and they turn out to be like these really amazingly intelligent and creative, and like the show was amazing, and it was real. And so they're like stuck in my head as something that could work, you know. And then I have this other woman stuck in my head who was testifying before the Illinois Arts Council the other day, and she's a visual artist, and she's leaving Chicago, and again, you know, and this might be me feeling guilty, but she started talking, and I kind of, in my head, I kind of said, kook, but she turns out just to be this really passionate, young visual artist who can't get any support any kind of way she tries, and she's, you know, and she wants to leave Chicago and go live somewhere where she can feel like people appreciate her. And so is there something in that we can, is there something that we can draw out of that in terms of support, like in all of the, you know, all of the disciplines coming together in efforts to support each other? I don't know, you know, the money's sucks.
Well, it's also too, like, I mean,
It sucks.
besides getting actual, like, you know, government support or any grants or, you know, private donors, I think starting completely over, I think what we really need in our day and age in our society, what we need to do is somehow build a way that theater is a viable entertainment option for the majority of the community. I mean, I'm not saying destroy TV or film or by any stretch of imagination, but I mean, you do go to London and people go to the theater. I mean, it's just, you know, they can turn on Channel 4 or they go to the theater. And I really wish that, you know, in a city like Chicago, I mean, we have great audiences and we have so much opportunity to perform and present, and people do come, but ultimately it's something that just seems, you know, that's not a viable option at times. You know, and I think it's a class thing. I think there's a lot of things that go with it, and I would start with being able to start with an audience or like engaging the audience and say, this is your story as much as it is ours, and we want to present your work, your voice as much as we want to, you know, perform or write or direct it. So I think it starts with the audience before it actually gets to a space or infrastructure.
Sometimes I wonder if you can take the religious aspect out of it, depending on where you fall on the spectrum. It seems like churches figured out how to do that thousands of years ago. Just open up the doors, and if people have an amazing experience, they help.
Yeah.
And I wonder, like, how do we amaze our audiences today?
Yeah.
I think there's something in what you're saying too about the, you know, when you're sort of infiltrating, right? And if if you're infiltrating and you're engaging and interacting with the communities, isn't that then, you know, don't they then make it a part of their lives?
Right.
You know? And that's what you're saying about the church too, is like people made it a part of their lives, and so they would never, you know, they would never let a church close. That would bring shame on a community, right?
I think it also, but then it goes to like, right, this vertical or horizontal, right, where like, if you go vertical, you're trying to get like the best, most virtuosic artists possible that have years and years of training and have paid a lot of money for that training, right? And so there's only a few people that can do that, and it's incredible, beautiful, amazing work. Or going this way, where like everyone's doing it, and sometimes, and it's always going to be a good time. It's always going to be a great. Right. You're going to cry just as much, or whatever, but it's not going to be yo-yo ma, right? And we have to decide, like, well, what do we want? You know, I mean, and certainly I'm sure there's both, but like this thing has to happen a lot less, and then this thing has to be the norm.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You know, this is a weird tangent to go on, but I've been doing a lot of driving lately, and I've seen a lot of auto accidents, like a lot of auto accidents. I don't know what it is about. It is, that's what I'm getting at. It is theater. It is theater, because I can tell you what has happened. I've been stuck in all these auto accidents because everyone's looking at it, because everyone's watching it, and it's just funny. It's like, okay, how is a random person going to watch a car crash, but they won't come to what's printed on the flyer I'm giving them about my theater show, right? And I think that, to me, implies creativity on how to get people's attention. You know, when I think about the church, right, and how is the church able to sustain this, it's like, well, what was the church competing against at that point? You
Church has an awesome story.
Yeah, right. You know, a very awesome
No matter what
story.
church or religion it is,
Right.
story building.
And in those days, I mean, not to be glib about it, but I think what church was competing with was hunger. Was a mass hunger. So people were like, I'm really hungry. I'm going to go to this great church. They got a great story here. I'm going to come back here every Sunday. You know, and I think again, it sounds like a very crass way of putting it, but I think we need a creative way to get people's attention and say, this is something that you can't see anywhere else, and you have to come here for it. And I think that does involve listening to what people are thinking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, if you really look at let's go all the way back to the very beginning, it started with the Greek. I mean, well, if we look at the Greeks, for instance, it started with the wine.
Right.
It started with the wine. They came for the wine, stayed for the show, left after the orgy, and then went home. And so, I'm not saying we need to toss in the orgy part. I mean, it would be nice, and that would probably get more ticket sales in. But I think if we say to ourselves, what is it that's really going to bring in the people to the storytelling moment? What's going to cause them to say, oh, I need to stay? Then we got them hooked. I mean, the reason why the church is such a big thing was because they were competing against the theater. And once they took out the theater, people were like, oh shit, where else am I going to get some stories from? Boom, hey church, here it is. And so, I mean, it's the trickle-down effect. And then they slowly started building stronger and stronger and stronger until, you know, the church is what it is now.
I piggybacking off of what Danny, what you were starting to talk about with social media, I feel like that's one of the biggest challenges for theater right now, is that we're not only competing with going to the movies or something like that. I mean, you can just go on YouTube and watch somebody like throwing out their trash, and that's like the biggest sensation. And then like down the street at a theater, like, you know, some amazing writer has written this beautiful piece. All these performers who have like devoted their lives to this craft are performing, and they're not selling any tickets. And I think it's because it's cheaper, right? YouTube is free. Social media is just like, it's a little more accessible. Two, there's no commitment. I think we're part of a society that's like kind of commitment phobic in a way.
Right.
You know, oh, I have to buy my tickets in advance. Like, I want to be able to just, you know, click on a button when I have time to sit in my boxers and watch this. I don't know. I think we're just dealing with the generation that's a little bit different. But I also think that what theater does have to offer, and I think it's what people get hooked on, which is why they end up coming back to it, is when you're at home and you're clicking on something by yourself, or with your cat or whatever it is, you're having that experience by yourself. And when you're in the theater, I mean, everything that the audience is experiencing together, you're hearing people's breath, you're feeling their laughter, you're feeling somebody's tension next to you, about something that they're going through, and that affects your experience, and it affects the actors on stage, and it's this beautiful exchange that doesn't exist in any other medium. And sometimes I wonder how, I remember the first time I went, I took my mother, a friend of mine was doing a show at the Shakespeare Theatre in DC just about a month ago, and I took my mother to go see the show, and I just remember looking over at my mom, and she was laughing so hard, and she was just like in it, and it made me so emotional because I've never seen my mom respond to that like theater. I mean, my parents have come to the theater to watch me in shows, and I just thought, wow, how do I know my mom probably wouldn't have come to the theater unless I brought her here. What can I do as a person who cares about the theatrical community to get someone like my mom who is so affected by this to come? And I talked with her about it after, and she's like, I like to come and it's fun when I'm there, and she's like, but I don't, it's like this but, and then there's a silence. I don't know what that silence is, and sometimes I wonder, do we need to create theater or write in a way that's more episodic so people will just keep coming back because people are hooked onto things like
absolutely.
that? I don't know.
Yeah. No, I mean, I've been kind of toying with that idea too. But I think too, Minita brings up a good point about, I don't know if it's unfortunate or not, but just because of the world we live in, because of the nature of my day job, whenever I work on a new piece or write a new piece, my immediate thought as I'm running is, okay, what's the community engagement campaign that goes with it? How, and I think there's some, we can, as artists and theaters, utilize like this social media thing that's happening, how does it, the thing that's missing is the live experience and that visceral, and how do you communicate that in like even our promotional materials, like don't just, not beyond like scenes from the play or the artists talking about their process. Why would the audience member who just happens to click on this YouTube video, is going to inspire them to say, I want to see that live experience? And I think we can really utilize that. I don't know where that fits in this umbrella. That just inspired me. Yeah.
So the next question I'd like to ask you, Elaine, and open it up to everybody. When you're looking at new work, not just new scripts, but new performances, whatever, given a choice between form, content, place, people, or tradition, what's the most important piece there?
You're asking some tough ones.
Wow. Good luck.
I didn't have a stick. I'll be right back.
You guys. Is there one, or are they all equal?
Well, it's interesting. Because I think pieces begin in different places. I think some pieces begin in form, and some pieces begin in language, and others begin in character. And it's interesting. It's kind of like when I write a play, I promise myself that I will never ever tell myself I know how I write a play. Because as long as I think I know how I write a play, that's the only way it will happen. And so I kind of feel the same about the question, is that I think sometimes it does start in some kind of traditional ritual or something that I remember or memory, or it might start, in seeing a piece, it might be about movement, and that might, I remember going to film school and falling in love with lighting, and I thought, oh my God, I could maybe never write another play. I might just want to sit and futz with lights for the rest of my life. And you never know what's going to grab your soul. Like, you don't know what's going to grab you. And I think, I love the fact that that is an unanswerable question. Because I think if we chose one of those, we would be limiting our theater, and I'm so glad we're not.
That's a great answer for an unanswerable question.
Yes.
Anybody else?
I have to echo her.
I would have said before content, because I was like, what would it say? But then
I was tempted by content. It was very seductive.
It took me to wine. Yeah, it took me to sushi. It's wine. But I remember last season I was in New York, and me and my boyfriend at the time were like, what are we gonna see? What are we gonna see? And some guy was, the tickets booth people are like, here, come see Motley. And someone was like, come see Bloody Andrew Jackson. And I was like, show about a president, whatever. And he's like a total like history president like junkie. He's like, we have to see this. I'm like, whatever, dude. It's about presidents. I'm not gonna see it, you know. And then the guy's like, well, I'm like, describe it. He's like, it's a punk rock emo version of Andrew Jackson's Duff. So I mean, well, besides my friend actually made her Broadway debut in that show. Just crazy. So I was like, I had to see it then. But I mean, what really sold me on seeing it is the fact that it was a punk rock emo version of Andrew Jackson, which Bailey will be doing this season. Anyway, I mean, there is something about how you tell this story, and like, you know, you can hear about like, you know, how many plays can you see about certain issues. A lot of them have universal theme, you know, like, or you know, a gay love story is always going to, you know, at heart will always be a gay love story. You know, a story about oppressed people will always be a story about oppressed people. In some ways, it's how you tell that story.
Yeah.
So if I had to choose one, it'd be porn.
Yeah, that's kind of like Kushner says, Angels in America is just two boys falling in love.
Yeah,
That's the only story he knows how to write.
Exactly.
One of the things, when Jen and I were initially talking about this panel, kind of the idea came from watching a video of Neal deGrasse Tyson's speech spliced with NASA stuff, and one of the points he's making is that in the 60s, when Kennedy announced they were going to the moon and the Russians had just put Sputnik up in the air, we started dreaming of a new future in a way that we hadn't in a while. And once we got to the moon, our entire conscious about what the world was changed.
Right.
You get Earth Day, you get Doctors Without Borders, and it completely reframed the world in a way that hadn't happened in a while, and there's an explosion of art and culture to accompany that. And I was also thinking a couple other things, like historically, if you look, in 1927, our idea of the entire universe was a solar system. There was nothing beyond that, and then Hubble made a little bit better of a telescope, and we got the idea of the universe, and there's an explosion of art and culture with that. And even in Shakespeare's day, they reached the New World, and you started seeing globes everywhere, and it completely changed their idea of what the world was, and there was another explosion of art. And I wonder, with the onset of social media and the internet, it seems like there should be an accompanying cultural shift and explosion, and I wonder if you guys think we're seeing that.
Yeah, I would agree. Oh, please, go ahead.
No, I mean, the way I'm experiencing it is, you know, I've always had good national relationships, but suddenly I have good international relationships.
Yeah.
Suddenly I'm interacting with directors and actors that I work with in Australia all the time.
Yeah.
And you know, this idea of, okay, you know, we're this culture and, you know, #1 in the world, and all that is starting to kind of fade away, that sense of like how important we are, which is, I think, so important to get rid of that. And everything is kind of equalizing, and I love that. I think that's absolutely going to change our art. I think, you know, one of the things I've always valued is, you know, not everybody has access to a great education, not everybody has access, and I think, you know, what about just teaching someone to write a play because they want to write a play? You know, they might not be able to get the MFA or whatever, but, you know, like when we were doing the Africa story, I was thinking we would be sitting at a table and writing every day and drinking coffee, and just getting something on the page, and just like starting that process. So I really feel like I'm excited about these international relationships, and I'm excited that my mind is opening and changing about how it sees my culture and where I'm from. And you know, it's interesting because one of the things that came to me when you were talking earlier is that, in a sense, we can create theater for shut-ins, in a sense. Yeah. The idea that this panel can be wherever. Somebody that doesn't have access, somebody who doesn't live in a big city, somebody who lives in rural Oregon can watch us. Right. Or maybe they'll be able to have access to the shows that you do this year. I don't know what that looks like, but there's a sense in which we involve and include more people. And we change the sense of, you know, the idea of presence is changing. We don't have to physically be somewhere to be present. And what is that? What does that look like?
Romero for the win.
I guess kind of not to redirect, but kind of on the flip side, one of the points that deGrasse Tyson is making is that we made it to the moon and then we stopped dreaming.
Right.
And I wonder if we're seeing that as well too, or if it's starting to come back the other way.
I would have to say yes. That yes, we have a grander scope of what the world is, but at the same time we are shrinking into our living rooms. We're shrinking into our living rooms instead of exploring. There's no more explorers, and I think we need, as artists, to say, screw that, let's rock the boat a little bit and prove that the world is not flat. You know?
Right.
Here's something that was really a project that happened. Oh my gosh, when was it? Last year. It was Filament Theater Ensemble. They did a project called Sustain 36, where they reached out to their followers on social media and said, "We want to produce a play in 36 hours. Give us content. What should this play be about? You know, it's about Chicago." And then, you know, from their followers, they arrived, okay, it's about Chicago. What about Chicago? And then they continued to, they're like, what's the title? And they, through that, and they used an app called Zarly, which is a marketplace app. And they said, all right, well, if we're going to produce this show, we need production, you know, like, you know, help us with set pieces, like, you know, costume pieces, and they reach out through social media that way. And it was this great conversation, and they did it in Portage Park, which is a hugely underserved artistic community, in my opinion, in Chicago. And they got that community involved, and it was in 36 hours for the people that they reached and the people who spread it virally, following hashtag Sustain36, they were able to put together this piece that was completely produced, supported, devised, curated by social media and the community that they were presenting it in. And it was really a moving piece. It was a lot of fun. And I think that the big fun of it was that everyone who was there in this piece, at this performance, was completely engaged on all aspects for the past 36 hours. And now they have this working relationship with Alderman in Portage Park. Now they're opening up their space in Portage Park, which is, you know, helping develop the artistic community there. And I think there is a way to be able to completely involve your audience and engage your audience and really find out what speaks to them. I mean, you know, I think it's, you know, we can keep reaching for the stars, but unless we, like, you know, invite people to come play with us in the stars using these tools, then we're just, you know, up there by ourselves, and we will stop, you know.
You know, one thing, if I could just say, you know, listening to that quote is so interesting because, you know, thinking about landing on the moon and these great innovations and thinking about, you know, you mentioned that people are in their living rooms. A lot of the reasons they're in their living rooms is because no one has jobs. You know what I mean? And it's so funny because it's really, you know, to think about that idea and concept. I mean, it really feels like, you know, any concept of the American dream, we're all waking up from, rubbing our eyes, realizing we feel terrible. Because it is rough, you know, it is rough. And yet, you look at, you know, there's a different genre. It's Bad Hangover. But then it's a different genre, but then you look at what films are being created. And we've got all of these superhero films happening. And so people need to dream right now as a way of escaping this horrible hell that they found themselves in. And so I challenge that idea that theater and arts can only thrive in moments of innovation, because I think of a play like Death of a Salesman and how that is America on the precipice of having been winners on the way looking down, right? And so I wonder if actually innovation will come from the flip side and not so much the success.
Yeah. And if people are unemployed, they have time to go to the theater.
Right.
But they don't have the money.
Right.
Well, I mean, I know that's something I think about a lot, I'm sure Lacey Panel does, about accessibility of just, you know, making it so, because I think that a lot of times people are really waiting to be invited to the theater.
Yeah.
I think, I literally, you know, I make friends with the people in my building and I bring them to the theater, you know, because and then they actually invite friends to come with them, and then suddenly we have a little group, and I'm like, and I'm trying to get people to go to readings who don't even know what plays are. You know, I went to an artist retreat a few weeks ago, and I had a fellow artist, a professional photographer, look at me and say, I do not know what a play is. What is a play? And I just found that, I mean, I was absolutely shattered. And I just wanted to stop everything and take them to a play. Like, you know, I was supposed to catch a plane. No, but we have to go to a play because, you know, but we have to take people's hands and bring them, I think. And make sure they know that they're invited. Because I know even people will, like for readings particularly, people will say, well, am I allowed to go to that? Is that something I can do? And it's like free. It's like, you know, that's, you know, so I think there's so many opportunities. But we have to reach out to people in a different way. And I love your idea, Marc, about wanting to do things just out in the world. There was a really interesting project several years ago at South Coast Rep that took place in a garden, a sculpture garden. And I'm interested in asking them how they sold tickets to that, or if they sold tickets and how that worked, because that would be really interesting to talk to them. It was a whole bunch of short Latino plays that were done in this garden. And I remember going to that and really liking that idea of theater happening in a public space. But they were bona fide plays plays with rehearsal and everything. They weren't just like happenings. They were, they were plays. Yeah, so I think Chicago has so many great spaces to do that.
And I think this idea also about, what Neal was saying about we need superheroes, we need to dream again, and that when you're in an everyday situation, if you're waiting on the platform or where in the line at the supermarket or Target or whatever, that if it's an everyday thing, and then suddenly somebody opens an umbrella and starts dancing, and some great ballet happens in front of you for like 5 minutes, with this little message of like, you don't just have to go through your little thing every day, that like every minute you have the option to break out in song, or just do something different, make a different choice. Maybe not that theatrical, but to make a different choice, that it's out there. To like, well, I'm gonna go home from lunch and just go to the park with my kids today instead. Just something different. I think more than that, seeing people do something drastically different might egg people on to do something a little different.
I mean, I wonder if that's a car crash. You know what I mean? That is a car crash.
Everyone crash your cars today.
Don't do that. Don't do that at all. But I also feel like perhaps we're going somewhere with that superhero movie thing. I mean, if you look at the traditional times, like at the Greeks, it was all about people that were superhuman, doing above and beyond the great Hercules, whatever else. And now, if you look at a lot of the theater that we do, it's all about a lot of it is a lot about the everyday and people are tired of the everyday. People have the everyday all the freaking time. Why am I going to sit in the living room and see somebody else's bullshit going on about their living room when I got bullshit going on in my living room? So maybe we need to go back to the Hercules stories and bring out our superheroes onto the stage once again. And people will be excited about it.
Well, I wonder if that's just because it is. Right now, I mean, all across the board, nobody's doing great, financially. People are really dealing with some strong things right now, and this is a time where we as a global community really need hope. And I think it's, stories like Superman or Batman or whatever, like what these great Grecian gods did is offer a source of hope, and you go to this movie and then you have 2 hours where you're watching somebody else struggle and then get saved, and that feels kind of cathartic for you.
Right. Which is like church.
It's because it's the spectacle mixed with the moral, the moral high ground, that no matter what comes at them, they're always going to rise above. With great power comes great responsibility. That sort of Spider-Man thing is, Peter Parker's just this boy from Queens, but then you give him a bunch of responsibilities and awesome web slingers, and he is. But no matter what comes at him, he rises above and always takes the high ground. And I think people aspire to that.
Yeah, and I think now more than ever we need those type of stories on our stage.
Thinking about this idea about Facebook, I think, we're talking about it being difficult times and the popularity of Facebook, and I think in a sense it's, we're turning to each other during difficult times, and how can we in the theater turn to each other? Maybe that's the question, because that does seem to be the emotional need in the world, so how do we answer that question? I don't know.
I guess the next question I'd like to open up to everybody, start with you, Devin, and go on. Not to pick on you, just on that end.
I didn't answer the last one.
So, I know in Chicago we have a tendency to be fairly jingoistic about how awesome Chicago is compared to the rest of the world. That's kind of
I'm in charge of that.
Well, I want to preface this question with that, because otherwise the question will very much seem that way, but the entire history of American theater is contained in Chicago. The earliest seed of the regional theater movement was Jane Addams and the Hull House. Right. And following up, starting about 1911 through the 20s, the little theater movement started in Chicago and Boston. And then with the rise of the regional theaters, it's all contained here. And kind of the bullet points in Chicago theater history, you got Jane and the Hull House, you got the little theater, you got the Compass Players, and then the first wave of Chicago theater rises, and you get the Goodman, Steppenwolf, Organic, the Remains, Body Politic, those cats. that dies out a little bit. Steve Scott says when True West went to New York, that killed it. That ended the first wave. Then after a little bit of time, the second wave rises, and you get Looking Glass and people like that. They're about 25 years old now. And then that dies out a little bit. Everybody moves to LA, gets famous. And then in the mid to late 90s, the third wave starts, and you get people like the Hypocrites and Steep and Timeline in the house. Assuming the pattern repeats itself, there's a little bit of a wane. Fourth wave rises at some point in the future. What do you want that to look like? What do you hope the fourth wave looks like?
What do I hope it looks like? I hope, here's what I really hope, on some level what I believe will happen, and I'm sorry I'm going to get back to money, but I hope that there will be a reallocation of resources. I don't think that the larger theater companies can actually survive. I don't think they will survive another 30, 40 years. And what I'm hoping is that those companies will turn into, when you look at the Garage Rep right now, right, what Steppenwolf's doing with the Garage Rep, I think it's a great program. I think it's, a little bit patronizing. But I think that the larger theaters are going to turn into a bunch of small theaters, and that they will bring small theaters will actually be occupying these spaces, because these spaces are these spaces, right? So they're going to have to be changed, they're going to have to be renovated, and where we moved into, however, 10 years ago or 15 years ago, everybody built these large spaces. I think that when those large spaces get renovated, there are going to be small spaces. I think there's going to be, if you imagine those buildings, there'll be, 4 or 5 smaller theaters inside those buildings, and that those will be, and you talk about not an entire community of artists can serve an entire community, then I think that that these will be, different companies actually occupying these spaces, and I think that that's really going to be what we see in the next wave. A part of me says, no, this is just you hoping that that's what happens, but another part of me doesn't see any other way, right? I don't see houses of, I don't see 900 people going to see a show, going to see 48 performances. That's not happening, and it's not going to get any better. And so I see it as a model thing, more as an aesthetic or artistic thing changing, and I think that there will be more, in terms of aesthetic, I think that there will be a more sort of inclusionary aesthetic. I think that when you talk about Hypocrites, House, Timeline, and Steep, right? Those 4 companies have a really, really strong aesthetic, and so when I look at those companies, I'm like, okay, those are, they have, thrived in this environment because of their aesthetic, and I think that moving, as we move forward, there's going to be more and more room for a wider range of aesthetics to be, and that there will be an audience for that, because I think that, so this is what we're seeing, right? Is that we don't want to go to the Goodman and see everything. We want to go to Steep and see. We like what they do. We like their aesthetic, and so we know what we're going to get. As as weird as that sounds, like you don't want an audience who always has come, because they're going to get the Happy Meal. You want an audience who wants to be opened up a little bit. But anyway, that's a wide-ranging, incomprehensible answer.
That's a really good one.
I like Happy Meal.
Anybody else? Would you like the next one?
I want it to look like this whole.
Yeah.
Honestly, I want the diversity of our stages to be right here, everybody.
I agree. I mean,
that would make me so delighted.
I agree with Elaine, and it just mixing it with Deb. It's like where the next 4 big companies, producing companies, are made up of like a completely diverse group of artists and administrators who not necessarily, and it's not even a thing of like, you know, it's not even an issue, and it's the aesthetic that separates them. It's less about what they're put, like, you know, the social commentary that they're putting out, or, you know, who's the makeup of it, but it's just diverse, and it's the aesthetic that sets them apart.
So, Neal, how do you know which dreams are the right ones to work on?
How do we know which dreams are the right ones to work on? Wow.
Because especially in comedy, half of it is killing the bad ideas.
Right. Well, I gotta be honest with you, I have a really sick sensibility. So if you're gonna kill anything, it's just important you enjoy it, I think. Like, but I mean that, actually. No, I mean that. I actually mean, you know, what dreams are the important ones to focus on. I don't know whose that is to decide, per se, versus the people actually doing the work. And I think that involves, again, being, you know, artists themselves, really staying true to the fact that being true to your own point of view is very important. And honing that point of view is important. And I do actually think that finding the dream involves killing other dreams. I actually mean that. And I do mean that you should have a ton of fun doing it, because I think that's what comedy is about. And I think, you know, what I love, you know, I won't make this like an extended therapy session talking about my own insecurities as a person, but I will tell you that I did get out of a lot of fights in 6th grade and getting pushed down the stairs by making idiots laugh at me. And so they didn't hurt me as much as they would, right? And so I think for me as a person and as an artist, comedy has been a tool and a weapon in that way. And I think that we can use that to forge our own dreams in the sense of, you know, dealing with really difficult situations and difficult themes and facing difficult, dirty parts of ourselves doesn't have to be a painful experience. But using the tool of comedy can actually be really refreshing and delightful. And I mean, I see this play out in situations. A friend of mine, okay, well, again, won't go into the story, but a friend of mine was telling me about a road altercation he had while on tour. And my friend is a black American, and this altercation actually became racist and heated when this car of Caucasian folks started to flash gang signs at my friend, right, which is terrible. So what did my friend do? My friend had a do-rag that he likes to wear in his pocket. So he took it out and he swung it around at them, and they burst out laughing. And he burst out laughing. And a minute ago they were flipping each other off, but then 2 people did racist things to each other, and now they're, what? Like, how does that happen? And that sort of break in logic, to me, is the importance of comedy and why comedy can be used for all of this. Because, you know, like anybody shaking a do-rag to somebody or flashing gang signs, any progressive liberal would tell you that's not a recipe for friendship. But those people were friends afterwards. Am I right? Am I right? Like, those people were all friends. And like, I guarantee you if they met each other at a rest stop, would have shaken hands and got to know each other. And so that's a re-examination of how we look at these dreams. Yeah.
So I'll throw this out to anybody who wants to answer. How do you navigate the border between the past, the present, and the future when all 3 of them are at play? Because I know for me as an artist, I can't break free of any of the traditions I've learned. I've learned that that's impossible no matter how much I want to try. And you're always creating work in the present, but also I have a sense that everything I do, and maybe it's being a father now, like I'm always building something for the future. And I'd love to hear how you guys navigate those borders between those.
I think flexibility is the most important quality for any artist. I think we don't know. You don't come into yoga being good at it, but you keep doing it, and eventually you have this. And I think it's just a skill we need. And I think if we're flexible, we're going to be able to handle the coming and going of spaces, the coming and going of artists. And if we're inflexible, that's when we're going to break, and it's not going to work. So for me, that's key.
I feel similarly. I was just, as you were speaking, I just kept thinking about breath. I really feel like that's really the way. It's the ability to take in, and then the ability to like breathe out and let go, and to really have a way to navigate. You know, I think there's a lot of things that we hold on to that we don't need to, and I think sometimes that's why we get stuck being stubborn about change. That can really benefit us, and I think, you know, the only way to navigate things is to be able to let go of what you need to let go of, to let yourself move forward to what's next, and so I really think it's something about breath.
How about you, Marc? 'Cause I know, like, one of the performances you told me about, you were running in the train, hoping you don't get caught in a full Mayan headdress performing.
I mean, yeah, what I was going to say was it's, you know, I think a good analogy is hip-hop, and especially in its golden age, where you have beat makers.
Hip-hop's already had a golden age.
We have beat makers, right, taking, sampling from records from the 60s, 50s, you know, soul, jazz, classic stuff. So taking these older beats, cutting them up, using parts of them with, you know, beat machines, 808s on top of it, and creating something in the present that, right, that is like paying homage, borrowing, whatever, from the past, but then also catapulting you into a future thing, right? And so, like, you know, like that particular piece, you know, we researched the Chilam Balam, which is this Mayan prophetic text written 1,000 years ago, and we try to recreate a Mayan ceremony on the train. But at the same time, it was, you know, I mean, there was all this like very postmodern movement stuff happening, and then the whole like guerrilla theater thing from the 60s and 70s. So I mean, I think it's great to and going back to school to get my degree, my MFA. You know, like not necessarily being an expert on Meyerhold and some of these other guys, but knowing just enough about them to steal some shit from them.
Absolutely.
And what I'm doing is in no way biomechanics.
Yeah.
It's my interpretation of it.
Yeah.
Right.
And you know, and it's this other thing, you know, and I think that kind of stuff is a good way of sort of that past, present, future.
Yeah, I think you're right with that. I think we need to recognize that nothing that we've done, that we're doing, has not been done before. But we can still do that, but put our own swag to it, and then
You got to learn the game before you break the rules.
right.
Right, and just to add a little thing on that, I love that, and I love really imitating the essence of how those artists created it, right? It's like, biomechanics doesn't mean anything, but the fact that Meyerhold re-envisioned the entire way of looking at the use of the body in theater, that, I think, is the important message to propagate. Yeah.
And you probably won't do all three at the same time either. I think there are moments in which you'll do it, and there are moments in which you won't. That you'll be honoring the past, there'll be moments in which you're not.
Yeah.
That's all good.
Any questions from folks in the house? Anything you'd like to know? No? Yeah.
Yeah. Taking a naive view of what you've been talking about, because I'm not a theater person per se. I work with the Saints, and I've worked with them on a couple of different areas. One, grants, and one on a new initiative that we started about a year and a half ago because we attended a League of Chicago Theaters training session with the Arts Alliance. Let me share something with you that is not confrontational and offered is possibly helpful. I think the theater community in Chicago, as brilliant and as wonderful as it is, again with a naive view, is so myopic and so artistically smokestacked that we attend so many shows that are so brilliant and moving as Saints in our ushering capacity that have no audience. And that...
What do you mean by artistically smokestacked?
That the view is how do we make better art versus the first question of how do we get somebody to see what we've already done, because what we've done is brilliant. But nobody saw it.
How do you connect the art you're making to the
Exactly, and that's why I love the infrastructure question, because for the last year and a half, as an outgrowth of that workshop, we created a group that tried to bring together the political organization in various wards with the Chamber of Commerce and the local theaters. We asked for no money. We provided our own volunteers. We got people together, and it's virtually died in Edgewater, in Uptown, and in Evanston, because the theater community didn't have the resources, the staff, or I think the interest to have anything other than the artistic conversation. And again, here's the money, here's the volunteers, here's the plan.
Right.
We'll do it all for you if you will simply tell us what to do.
I have an idea.
And you can't be bothered.
You just gave me a great idea.
Yep.
Okay. Because I love the Saints. I go to the shows and they're there and they're awesome, and I really appreciate that work. It means a lot. And my mom's a big book club person, and I would love it if the Saints had play clubs. Where there's a group of why not? Maybe host play clubs where they're going to do 8 shows together. I would love that.
Yeah, there's a couple of meetup groups like that that do like
They
Chicago.
do play clubs.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's awesome.
I'm not aware of that. Are they coming to this theater? Are they coming to your shows?
Well, it's really interesting because
Let's get them here. I mean,
I don't want
Yeah.
the meetup groups are not like.
I mean, because
So
Tony
what
and
Jim was
Jen do
saying,
amazing
there's
work.
a lot of that
Yeah.
where, I try to get out and see at least one show a week,
Right.
which with 2 kids and running a theater is tough.
Yeah.
But I'm always amazed at, even though I only see 50 shows a year, how many of the same people I see at those 50 shows a year.
It's always industry people.
I mean, I think we run into this
Free
idea that we're
tickets.
doing it for ourselves or we're doing it for each other, and we have to open it up in a way that people feel invited and they know that it's for them. It's not for us.
Can I actually, is it okay if I piggyback on that?
Yeah.
Because it's definitely part of the journey that I'm on. I think I started out musical theater when I was 5, and for a really long time, up really until Halcyon, I sort of didn't want my art to be about politics. I didn't want my art to be about the social issue, and I was at that, early 20s age where it was like, this is my art and it's my art, so fuck you if you don't like my art, and then I got older. But I think that it is a very myopic community, and it's daunting, and for, at least I know for artists, and generally speaking, to open themselves up to non-artists, because then they sort of have to suffer the consequences of maybe the non-artistic community is not as nice as the artistic community is, if it's not so good, or and also when you're in a talking about space too, when you're in a situation where you have 300 theater companies performing at any given time in a city like Chicago, and you're not always in the same place, it's difficult to grab onto a community that you're then able to speak to and to say, what do you want to see? What do you want to hear? We're doing this. Does it jive? So, so I think that that's also a really big challenge. The sort of self-interest that a lot of artists have in producing art and not producing a community message or a community experience, and then this disadvantage of never being in the same community. So it's definitely been a challenge for Halcyon, and then you've got the third aspect of it being usually grassroots organizations that are completely, for as professional as we are, no one's getting paid, and so you've got 2 people, 3 people that are doing the marketing, the directing, the acting, the everything, the development, the this, that, the other, and we're contacting Latino organizations in the 2nd and 3rd week of performance because there's been nobody to do it before that.
Right. Well, are there any other questions?
Sorry, but it's
Did you
it's
kind of
hard.
off of both of those? Well, I'm still a newbie to the wonderful world of Chicago and its theater community. But something that I used to do when I was doing theater in Houston and in Minneapolis and everywhere else is I would do one night where it's I'm going to do one night dedicated solely as a fundraiser to some organization that parallels whatever else this is. And And if we don't make, you know, a shitload of money off of that, well, at least we brought in that community into the mix. And they're going to bring in people from that organization that supports that organization that's down for the cause. Or I'll say, okay, well, I need musicians, so I'm going to ask some band that has some following to be into the mix with this show. I'm going to ask some art gallery people to bring in their art. I'm going to bring in people who normally don't do theater. I pick up people off the street. I say, can you read?
Yeah.
Want to be in a play? You got a good look. And then they bring in like God knows how many people into their thing, because you got to constantly be thinking, how can I make this hustle work so that I'm being a part of the community. And a lot of people I feel they kind of have a little self-masturbatory thing when it comes down to their art versus wanting to be. I think it's the masturbatory versus the orgy mindset, and you got to have the orgy mindset in order for the party to start up.
And I come back to when I hear things like what you said, Jim. There's two ways you could look at it. One is like it's a damn shame that the great work's not being seen, and the way that I tend to look at it, and I'll flip this into a question, so there's an actual point to it. It's an amazing opportunity right there, because the hard thing is to do great work that speaks to people. The speaking to people is the easy part, and the amazing opportunity that presents itself every day across the city is just turn that outward and start connecting with people. And if you've built the great work, it should be easy to do it. So that's an amazing opportunity. So the kind of the question I'll put out there for anybody is, what is the amazing opportunity that the future holds that we just got to look and see?
I think that there's a myriad of amazing opportunities that the future holds, you know, and if, I agree with you on a certain level, but, I hate to, come back around to resources, but that's it, right? People just, people start a theater company for the love of the theater, and everything else is secondary, and that would be, if I were asked, which I haven't been, to give anybody, it can't be just about the play if you're going to have a theater company.
You have to...
Right? You have to look at all of these opportunities, and you have to choose. Everybody has to choose, right? But there has to be, you have to focus somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that would be, and it might be the Saints brought us this awesome opportunity. Let's take advantage of it. Let's do it. Let's go all the way with it. But then so many times it's like, yeah, but I have to, get the, I have to, go down to the south side and pick up the lights for the show. I don't have time to do that today. So, I understand that, but it always comes back around to the same thing, and it's that what you're the lack of resources means that you're spending that much more manpower, driving down, renting the truck, driving down the south side, picking up the lights, loading them in yourself, bringing them back up here, hanging them yourself, and then running the light board, for God's sakes.
Work 40 hours at your day job.
And have full-time jobs, right?
Yeah, right,
and have full-time jobs that actually pay you, families, the whole nine, yeah.
I think too, a big thing, Deb was talking about, people start theater companies with the best intentions of expressing themselves artistically. I wonder if there isn't even something to, as opposed to, when you pick your season, as opposed to saying, this would be great for so-and-so, and this would be a good work for me to direct. Is there an audience for this?
Right.
Right. Like, whenever I write something new, I invite, I do a table read, invite the people, the actors I wrote it for, whoever, and I invite a couple directors, give me feedback. But then I invite, I'm really lucky to have a lot of non-theater friends.
Right.
And I invite them, I'm like, well, this play, have I just been jacking off for 120 pages, or is this something, And, if they tell me it is or not, well, then I shelve it. If it's not, and if it's something, then let's see what happens with it.
What do you think, Minita? What amazing opportunity were you just blind to?
I'm thinking about two things, because one is I just feel like the thing I'm thinking about right now is I think, especially with this the storefront scene in Chicago, which is so huge and amazing, and I don't know, it's the reason that I moved to Chicago, because there's so much new work and great work that touches people. I feel like we're missing the storefronts that I think are doing really well, that have really grown, have a strong sense of business to them too. Yeah. They're doing well on the business side as well, and I think, you know, all the companies that you mentioned, like Steep or Timeline, or even theaters like Sideshow and Theater 7, they're doing really great work, and somehow there's at least a couple of people or more in their organization that also has the side of the brain or experience that knows how to handle the business savvy. Because I think when we start talking about audiences and marketing and things like that, what we're then looking at is the business of theater. And so I think we need to start looking at how to train ourselves to be a business as well. We're not lacking in great art in this city. I think what we're potentially lacking, or that we haven't tapped into yet, is how do we fuse this great art we can do with like these great, I'm sure there's a lot of people that have great business minds, and how do we get that going? The other thing I just wanted to say, and if it's okay to go back about...
it's not okay.
It's not done. But about resources and how do we get audiences to come. You know, I went, and I know I talked to Tony about this a while ago, I went to one of these equity meetings that they have, and it was called Getting Minority Butts in Seats. That was the title. And
What?
Yeah, it was called Getting Minority Butts in Seats. And I was like, I have to go to this because I feel passionate about this. And I get there, and there were like there were as many panelists as there were audience members, maybe less audience members. And I really remember feeling like my heart kind of broke. Because I'm like, wow, here's all these great people speaking about this issue. And I look back and I feel like for all the people I know in the community that have been like, how do we do this? How do we get a diverse audience? How do we build an audience base? Almost none of them were there. And I was like, okay. And then one of the things that came out of that, and I'm really thankful to Malik and Jamil of Silk Road Rising, because one thing that came up is, well, you know, the main sources for people to come to the theater are often the reviews. And we don't really have any reviewers in our community that are of diverse backgrounds. And maybe if we did, there would be people of these communities, maybe they would read from reviewers of their own culture and start to come to the theater. So I started this thing called Chicago Theater Minority Report with the hope that I would be able to get writers of different diverse backgrounds to come and review shows, and that people from all of our communities would be able to read these reviews and start coming. And there seemed to be like a good interest about it at the beginning. And then I had a few reviewers that weren't able to come to the shows at the last minute or so on and so forth, and it kind of fizzled out. And I just feel like, I think that I don't know, maybe that wasn't the best way to go about doing it. Maybe it's not getting reviewers of different genders and minority backgrounds and to start reviewing theater, but there is something about, I know that if my mom reads India Tribune and it says this play is going on, she's going to go see it. You know what I mean? And I just think that's true for every community. How do we reach out to those communities? Because whatever the answer is to that, I think that's going to be the key.
I think the big thing about that is a lot of those, I know, like Via Times and like, you know, a bunch of the Filipino newspapers, they won't touch a story or a play unless it has, you know, it's a Filipino thing, and we don't have any, which is why I wrote my play, you know. So, but it's like until, I think a big key to that, in addition to who's writing the review, is that my story? Right. Yeah. And if a lot of minorities don't see themselves represented on stage, I mean, let's talk about the Asian American audience for the Nightingale LOA right now. There probably isn't very many, you know, but it's like, it's, you know, unless they're seeing their story on stage, a lot of minorities are like, well, what does that have to do with me? You know?
And if I could say, that's a deep-seated thing. I mean, I for years have felt sort of, you know, like all my friends in school who like would quote musicals. I'd be like, didn't see those musicals. Right. Two Indian parents didn't make it out to a lot of musicals. I don't know what this is. You know, and I think that that's important to consider. consider, because that's also, you know, creating a space that's welcoming to that. You know, and there is a cultural exclusion when you don't feel like you understand kind of where the stuff is coming from or what the stuff is. You know, and so I wonder if that's another secret, is how do you make more people feel comfortable at the theater?
Yeah.
Can I just
Why?
wait? No, I want to. No,
We're out of time.
no, because I was talking to. I had this really great idea for an educational program, and a couple years back, and you know, I got to approach Sydney Chapman about it, and I don't know if you guys know her, but she runs Turfwood Chitlin Circuit, and I preface this by saying, like, looking back on it, it was very, like, missionary on my part, you know what I mean? And I was glad that she sort of put me in my place. But when I was telling her my thoughts about it, she's like, you have to get these kids to trust you.
Yeah.
Like, they're so used to people coming into their space for, like, a very limited amount of time and then leaving. And so I think that speaks to a larger issue, too, is that, you know, you can't, we've been asked that question so many times, is like, you can't just like reach into a community for a show and then leave. It takes a long time to build that trust and to build that like communication between you in terms of like, you know, we're not doing a show about the Filipino experience this time. We did last time, but we would love to find a way to like that you would be interested in coming still. And so, you know, and so like, how do you do that when you're not producing and when you're producing something that doesn't speak to their experience?
And just really quick too, just to add to that, I mean, but Porchlight Music Theater did Pacific Overtures 3 years ago, and it was, I mean, all of us were Asian in it, you know, because it's a story about Japan, surprise. And but like I mean, it was the only show that season that could have extended. We were oversold. It was great, and we couldn't extend because of the resource, because you know the next show, the rep was moving in. But from that audience, I mean, there was an upsurgence of Asian American subscribers at Porchlight the next season. They all, you know, and whether you know they continue to tell Asian American stories or not, and whether they stuck around the season after, it was that initial. They told our story. We're going to be faithful and see what happens next. You know, it was really, really cool to see.
We're just about out of time. So more questions.
Okay.
But kind of the last thing that I like doing is like go through and see what plugs do you guys have, what are you working on.
I'm working on my trilogy, and I just rewrote a play called A Work of Art that I've been developing at the Goodman as a member of the Playwrights Unit, and I'm going to be starting the Gerasi Fellowship later in the month.
I'd like to plug two things. One thing I'd like to plug is a stage reading I'm doing with Minita here. It's at Silk Road Rising. It's The Doctor is Indian by Shane Sharkani.
This weekend, right?
What's that?
It's this weekend, right?
It is this weekend. Yes, it is this weekend tonight and tomorrow. Another show I'd like to plug. I do a show at the Annoyance Theater called Skin Prov every Saturday nights at midnight.
Are you performing in it?
I do perform in it, yes.
Yeah.
I think, I'm going to be honest with you, talking about underattended, you will be the 5th or 6th audience member there. If you come, come to it, because it's a lot of fun. Yeah.
Right now, I'm working on my first comedy, which is Blackula, Young, Black, and Undead.
Yes!
And it's going up in October. It's going to be at Pegasus Theater, Pegasus Players in October. And then the second play in my 9-play collection, the City of the Bayou collection, the place called Southbridge will be opening during the Black Slot at Chicago Dramatists this year.
That's amazing.
I'm guessing that's February.
I am, so, like you're talking about, it's called Mahal. It actually had this, we started development at Silk Road as part of the summer of Laughs is what they're calling it, which is, it's great to meet you because, yeah, we started and bookended. It's about a Filipino-American family. It runs June 1st through July 20th of next year. So I'm in the middle of rewrites. We're doing a workshop sometime in the fall, but that opens at the upstairs space at Victory Gardens. And non-theatrically, I've got a daily, God help me, episodic fictional series called Boys Town about gay people in Boys Town, and it's kind of the drama. It's like Tales of the City meets Sex in the City meets Gossip Girl, and so on. And that's running exclusively on the Go Pride Network. So if you go to ChicagoPride.com, it's one of the front and things. I am in talks to do a web series about just being a Chicago theater practitioner on Gay Chicago TV, so that's in talks. Hopefully that'll be going up in the fall. And my column on Go Pride called The Backstage Pass, which again helps promote theater companies beyond reviews, because I told them flat out I'm not writing reviews, but if there's something interesting about a process or about a story, I want to help my storefront brothers and sisters promote their work. So my first column post with that about the 5 lesbians eating a quiche production of New Colony going to Fringe is going to go out today. So yeah,
That's great.
Backstage Pass. That's cool.
Well, as Neal mentioned, I'm doing this wonderful reading of The Doctor is Indian at Silk Road Rising, and we have one more performance tonight and another one tomorrow. And then upcoming in the fall, I'm going to be doing Equivocation at Victory Gardens, directed by Sean Graney, and I'm really excited for that. And then I think soon you'll see me in something small on the Onion web series, so keep an eye out for that.
Awesome. I'm this month, like in the next couple of weeks, working on a guerrilla theater experiment with a few folks here in Chicago. So hopefully we'll have something up on YouTube at the end of it all. See how that goes. And then November 2nd, I'm opening right in this space in the Red and Brown Water. I'm directing for my final thesis production at DePaul.
Hard to compete with all of this. My work is so different. But I've spent the summer really taking a lot of ideas that have come from the community and from our staff and from me and from our board, and really exploring, researching, and fleshing them out, and looking to the future of the league. Really kind of a strategic planning process, but without having that kind of label on it. And so we hope to be able to announce in the fall a couple of new projects that the league's going to start working on. That's great.
Thanks everybody for coming.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.